Good day and greetings from the Great White North. My name is Prickly Boo and welcome to day 149 of a year of change. Today we're going to talk about something that we haven't really addressed very much. I think it's a good time to sort of bring it in though, just because it's probably something that you've started to notice. A couple of weeks ago when we first started looking at sodium, more than really the salt content or the salt usage, I guess, that we've had, a lot of you have probably noticed that you're paying a little more attention to what's on the label of things. And although later on we're going to be working on fat and sugar, right now the only thing that we really have for a frame of reference is sodium. So that's sort of going to be what our focus is on. Now, I guess the main crux of this one is just going to be sort of what you would consider processed food versus, you can call it what you want. Some people go, oh, well, real food and fake food. It's not really fake food, but the highly processed food as opposed to, I guess, homemade food is probably the best way to put it. Now, I'm not a big processed food person. I don't often buy like prepackaged meals or TV dinners or, like microwave meals and stuff like that. I never really have been, just because I found that they were usually very bland. If you're one of those people that have bought those in the past, or that you still are, or canned vegetables or anything like that, because we've been looking at sodium, you've probably noticed, that you're being a little choosier in what you're doing. And some of you may have actually started sort of leaning more towards doing the homemade stuff, just because you have a little more control as to what's going into it. So it's pretty much what I want to talk about today. If you remember, a few weeks ago, quite a while ago now, I don't exactly know when, that's the start of a book, isn't it? Many years ago, never mind how far, something like that. Oh, I don't know what it is. Anyway, it's from a famous book, and I'm misquoting it, and I know I'm misquoting it, I just don't know the exact words. Like, many years ago, it doesn't matter how many now. Anyway, I'll figure out what it is. That's going to drive me nuts. Anyway. So, a few weeks ago, if you remember, I had 1 week where, although I had stayed below my calorie goal for the week, I had pretty much lived on pre-made pizzas. They'd gone on sale, and I bought a whole ton of them, and I thought, good enough. They still have vegetables on them. They still have the bread. They still have all the good stuff. So I'm not going to be malnourished. I'm just going to, I'll live off pizza for a while, which I've done many, many times in the past before we even started all this. And there was a big difference in how I felt, though, at the end of the week. And although I had stayed below my calories, I couldn't even begin to tell you what the sodium level was, or the sugar or fat, because we weren't tracking it at that point. I felt like shit by the end of the week. I just was logy and just wanted to sleep all the time and just felt horrible. And it was one of those things that I didn't realize what it was until we sort of sat down and started talking about it. So, I can't imagine that I could be wrong, but if I had made this stuff myself, as opposed to going and buying the prepackaged stuff, I don't think it would have had the same reaction. Plus, now that I'm looking at sodium and all the other stuff, I think that the level would be much, much lower. So, there are some things, obviously, that, just don't seem to fit right with canned stuff that you might have been buying in the past, that I'm hoping you're going to lean more towards the homemade stuff. There are some things, obviously, that we can't avoid, like cereal. You're not going to make your own cereal. It's far too labor-intensive, unless you're going to go out and buy raw oats and then fruit and nuts and everything else and mix them all together and make your own cereal. You're not going to do that. Stuff like that is going to be fine, although obviously like real cereal, not things like Fruit Loops and Count Chocula? Yeah, and like stuff like that, not the candies, but the actual cereal. What else? Well, we've actually introduced some as well, like the pickles. You're not going to make your own pickles. Most of you are not going to make your own pickles. There are some that we've introduced that are a little bit different, like the fresh fruit and the dates and stuff like that. But there are some things that, it's just so much easier to buy processed. Pasta, it's a lot easier to go and buy pasta than it is to make your own. Again, one of the main goals that we've had with this right from day one is to keep it realistic. That's why we've done the tiny, tiny changes over the past 5 months. That's why we still haven't cut out any foods. And it's just another one of those things that, no, you need to be realistic. You can't just say, well, I'm not going to buy any more processed food ever again. Because you are. You can't get around it. But there are some things that we can avoid getting. And it's not to demonize them or anything like that, or to say, oh, well, processed foods are evil and you shouldn't be buying them because you'll die and you're poisoning your kids. It's just that when you're looking at something like, I'm going to use canned spaghetti because it's the first thing that comes to mind. Like anything like canned pasta, for example. It's, for me anyway, I've never liked it, even as a kid, because it was always just goopy and didn't have any flavor to it or anything like that. But ignoring the flavor aspect of it, just having something like that canned, yes, it's a lot easier to, actually any food that you can just sort of dump into a bowl or on a plate and reheat and you're fine. Those are the sort of things that I'm talking about. Those are the processed things, like even canned vegetables, which are always soft and gooey and gross. Canned pasta, TV dinners, prepackaged hamburger patties, stuff like that. All these things that have already been sort of processed and that you just need to sort of reheat. Or in some cases you do need to cook, but you know what I mean. I'm trying really hard to describe the difference between that and the homemade stuff, but I think you understand which one it is. And I've lost my train of thought because I had a point and now I don't know where I was going. Anyway, okay, we're going to sort of start over. Yes, we were talking about unavoidable ones. There are some that are going to be unavoidable. Cans of soup. There's another one. It's much easier. I mean, unless you're actually planning on making a soup with something, it's much easier to buy, a can of it and just make it that way. So there are some things that you're still going to be able to do that, or not able, but you know what I mean. Still some things that you're going to say it's 10 times easier to make this, just a can of soup as opposed to something else. But in general, when you're looking at stuff like, primarily, I guess, meat and fruit and vegetables, things like that. Those are the sort of things like what you would consider to be the base of your meal. I understand that time constraints are a big thing. You're at the end of your day. You're exhausted. You don't want to go and cook a whole bunch of stuff. You don't want to spend the extra time doing it. It's just much easier to go and buy something that's same thing with, getting food from a fast food place. It's just sort of one step up from that is the processed stuff and then homemade stuff. But the amount of stuff that you're going to get out of it, as opposed to a prepackaged meal, is going to be much, much better. Not just in terms of nutrients and flavor and stuff like that, but taking those extra 10 or 20 minutes to prepare, unless you've got a huge family. If you've got like a massive family, like 12 kids or something, then yes, it's going to increase your cooking time way, 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 way too far. But it's one of those things that we really should start looking at sort of working in more and more. Aside from all, you could sort of go in and say, well, you lose this and there are preservatives and there's a whole slew of stuff that are in processed foods that are bad for you. That's not really something that we can talk to yet because we haven't looked at it. To be honest, the only thing that we've really looked at have been calories and sodium at this point. So we'll stick with the sodium because that seems to be sort of a common thing and we're going to sort of keep things in that same vein for the next couple of weeks. So if you're looking at even just at sodium levels, and I don't mean saltiness, because you can have stuff that has a tremendous amount of sodium in it that doesn't taste salty. I'm not sure how they do that, but they seem to be doing it very well. As opposed to the homemade stuff, you're going to notice that it's going to be much easier to keep those sodium levels down with your homemade stuff. And if you're going and saying, well, I mean, obviously processed meats, we aren't really talking about like cold cuts and stuff like that, because there's a ton of salt in it because they're cured meats. What I mean are the prepackaged burgers and prepackaged chicken and all the stuff like that that's already been made that you pretty much just have to throw in somewhere and heat up for 20 minutes and you're done. I'm really not explaining the situation very well, am I? I feel like I'm all over the place. I'm trying to make an argument that the homemade stuff is going to be better for you, just in general. Aside from the flavor and the texture and all the other good stuff, the nutrients you're going to be getting from that, I can't imagine it's going to be too different from the stuff that you would get from prepackaged stuff, but you're not getting all the extras. The extra sodium and the extra sugars and all the stuff that you don't need in that same amount of food that you won't be getting with the homemade stuff. And there is a bit of a time investment. But throughout all of this, I mean, you've been investing time anyway, whether it's with your exercise that we've been doing or whether it's been just from watching these videos. There is that time investment that you need to put in to get to where we want to be. It's not going to be something as easy as saying, well, no, I can just cut down on my calories and we should be fine. I mean, we said that before, calories in versus calories out, and, eat less, do more. Obviously, it's a little more complicated than that, but trying to keep things simple. But I find that, for me anyway, where I don't really buy a lot of canned stuff, I never buy canned vegetables because I find that they're really unpalatable. They're always too soft and too gooey, and they just don't taste like anything. Same thing with like canned pasta. I've never bought that because it's just goop, and I inevitably have to add some more stuff in there. I mean, as I say, there are some things like regular pasta, and know it's still processed, but it's much easier than just making your own pasta. When you're looking at getting things that, are going to take hours and hours of time, whether it's old used pasta again, mixing the ingredients and then extruding it and then letting it dry and everything else and storing it properly and things like that. Unless you actually have a pasta maker or something, then you're probably not going to do that. Same thing with cereal and, soup and stuff like that, because there are some things that cut way down on the prep time. So if you're looking at saying, well, I can either do this for 2 or 3 hours, or I can take, 5 minutes and get the soup, as long as you're getting the right kind and you're okay with it, then fine. Just, that's understandable. What I mean, though, is that if you need to take 10 or 20 minutes to prepare like instant mashed potatoes and let's say pre-made hamburgers, and then you have to reheat canned vegetables and stuff like that, that's what I'm sort of more what I'm talking about. You still have a prep time that you have to do with all that stuff. You've got to prepare the meat. You've got to make sure that it's still cooked all the way through, even though everything's already pre-done for you. Instant mashed potatoes and all that stuff. When it's going to take the same amount of time to just prepare actual meat. That's, you know what I mean. Meat that you get like from the meat department at your store or butcher or wherever you want to go to get it. And making real potatoes and real vegetables and things like that. The benefit that you're getting from that is going to be much more than what you would get from having the pre-processed instant stuff, which is never instant anyway. You still have a prep time. So when you're looking at it that way and you think, okay, it's pretty much the same amount of time to do it anyway, always opt for the homemade stuff. It's going to be much, much better, and it's much better for you. You don't have a lot of the extra stuff that goes in there, and I'm not talking about like pesticides and chemicals. You don't have to go to a farmer's market and get, purely organic, everything that's been grain fed in the sky or whatever the hell else it is that they do. Just, again, keeping things realistic so that instead of coming back from the grocery store and having everything in a box, you'll have your things that you need in a box, have those in a box. That's still fine. But a lot of the stuff that you should be buying at this stage, and a lot of you probably have noticed this, especially where you started looking at the sodium, that it's just much easier to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to put in an extra 5 minutes of cooking and get rid of, all the extra canned stuff because you've been trying to bring your sodium levels down. And a lot of you have noticed that by now it's probably helped a great deal. Any of the homemade stuff that you buy is always going to be lower because you can really control what you're putting into it. You're not dumping in, 3 cups of salt or 8 cups of sugar or whatever it is that's in there. You have a much, much more control as to what you're putting into it. And a lot of the time, that's, for right now anyway, that's what we're paying attention to, is going to be the sodium. So, I don't know if I've made my point. I really don't. I feel like I've just sort of gone all over the place. And I figure that people are still waiting going, what is he actually talking about? Anyway, so try that for this week. This isn't really a food change. It's not a requirement because, again, real life is going to sort of trump anything that you're doing, watching a video on YouTube. So, but when you're going to the grocery store, do your first stop in the produce aisle. Grab your fruits and vegetables there as opposed to getting them canned. You'll be surprised, and it doesn't have to be something expensive. It doesn't have to be something exotic. But when you're looking at the volume of what you're getting for the cost, when it comes around here anyway, when it comes to fruits and vegetables, the fresh stuff is generally the same price as the canned stuff. And no, it's not going to last as long, but that may prompt you to start eating more of it anyway at each meal instead of saying, well, yeah, we still have this can of cream corn, which I don't understand why people buy cream corn anyway. It's disgusting. It's corn, and but after 2 or 3 spoonfuls, you realize this is just, I'm eating corny mush. Anyway, that's another topic. But start there and get what you need. Say, even if it's for 3 or 4 days because you know it's not going to last too long. Get your stuff there. You're going to find that the cost of it being fresh is not that different than it being canned. It's not going to last as long, but hopefully you'll eat it and it'll make things better. And again, it can be just the basics like broccoli and carrots and lettuce and whatever you decide to get. Try something different. Try some of the ones that we've shown you here, like the kohlrabi or the chayote. Try those just for something a little bit different. When you're going to get your meat, just get the stuff from if you have a meat section in your store or a butcher's section. We do here. We normally, all of our stores, I don't know why I'm acting as if this is a novelty thing. I guess because we have, like, the majority of the stores that we have here, they do have sections where you can get, like, the frozen meat and all the prepackaged stuff, but it's much smaller than the fresh meat section, which usually takes up one entire side of the store. So I'm assuming it's going to be the same everywhere, maybe? You don't have to go and spend, $20 on meat that you could get for $4 somewhere else. I mean, grab it when it's on sale. Why not? But instead of getting all the prepackaged stuff, go find out what's on sale and buy it there. Whether it's chicken or beef or pork or whatever it is that you eat, or whatever's on sale actually at the time, and prepare that so that you have that. It's going to be something a little bit different. It's going to be, and as long as you can get it at a decent price, it's in the long run, it is much cheaper than getting all the prepackaged stuff. I know that we sort of talked about that last week, where the processed food is much cheaper than fresh food. That is sort of true when you're looking at sort of like individual servings for things, or if you're looking at like TV dinner sort of things. But in the long run, if you're cooking for yourself and your family, like the stuff that you're going to be buying fresh or homemade, I'm going to put homemade in there because I don't want this to turn into something like not hippie food, but just homemade stuff. That the stuff that you're going to be buying there, because it goes so much further, and because of what you're getting out of it and everything else, but just it's much better. But the cost itself, in the long run, is actually lower than the processed stuff, and it's much lower than getting fast food. Although everything is really cheap, it's just that there are so many different things that you can do with it that it in the long run it does work out. Anyway, I don't know if I've made my point at all. I guess just over the next couple of weeks, start leaning more towards doing the homemade thing rather than the pre-processed stuff. If for no other reason than to take a look at the sodium levels and be able to control how much sodium is going in. As things progress and we start looking at fat and sugar, you're going to notice that the majority of stuff has actually much more sugar than sodium. It's something that I've noticed recently when because I didn't want to sort of trade off my sugar for my sodium for snacks and things like that. And that's one thing that I started looking at more and more, and it's just some of the stuff that you would never expect to have sugar in it is insane. Spaghetti sauce, for example, has like a regular jar of spaghetti sauce, which you wouldn't think. Yes, there's going to be some sugars in it from like the tomatoes and things like that, but there's like half a cup of added sugar on top of it, which is really weird because it doesn't taste sweet, but there's a tremendous amount of added sugar in there. Anyway, that's just something that I've sort of noticed. We'll get to that in a few weeks' time anyway, so don't worry. You sugar your brains out as much as you want. But for right now, over the next couple of weeks, when you're going to the store, start leaning more towards that way. And a lot of you probably already have, where you've been looking at the sodium content of stuff, that you think it's just all, it's going to be easier just to buy what I need to buy and make it myself than it is to get it out of a box. So if you can, hopefully by the end of the next couple of weeks, when you're going to get your groceries, even if your cart is half and half regular stuff and half box stuff, then at least you've made some progress. And that's the main thing. And as things progress, you're going to be doing it more and more, and you're going to find that you're going to be able to, well, unless you already know how to cook, you're going to find that what am I thinking of? I want to say that there's more variety and that you're going to be able to do more with it, but that's not exactly it. I'm going to leave it because I don't know what I was going to say. I'm going to remember as soon as I'm done recording as well. I'll hit stop and go, God damn it, that's what I wanted to say. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I'm going to leave it there. So just I was going to say it again. I'm going to repeat myself once again. So I've started repeating myself. It's time to cut things off. So go in, use your brain. That's mainly what we've been trying to do for the past 5 months. And especially with something like this, it's going to be much easier because you're a little more aware of what's in the package now. And that's going to increase as we continue on over the next few weeks. But it's a good starting point and just something to keep in mind as you're going through. And if you have the chance to get something that's fresher, as opposed to something that's in a can or in a box, definitely go for it. So that's it for this video. So thank you very much for watching. I'm going to leave this here now because I think I've already repeated myself and I want to keep summarizing. I just want to keep on repeating and saying, and don't forget to do this, and don't forget to do this again and again and again and again and again. And I don't know why I do that. Anyway, I think it's probably because I'm ill prepared for this. Because in my head I was thinking, well, this is why homemade stuff is so much better than packaged stuff. And all I have is, well, because there's less sodium. I don't have enough information. Aside from the preservatives and all the other bad things that we know that sort of get thrown in there and all the extra stuff. I'm going to start repeating myself again. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. Okay, I can't stop. Anyway, I'm going to end this video now, as opposed to that I said I was going to do it 30 seconds ago. So thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, please poke the like button for me. And in the meantime, keep yourself warm and fuzzy, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.